Dr. Dohmen, you are representing a research institute. You are the CEO of a research institute for economics of education and social affairs in Germany. So maybe, first of all, you give us like a glimpse about your institute. What does it do? And the project that you're currently running. And then maybe later you can reflect on the contrasting between the present situation, which has been reflected now through the contributions of our panelists, and maybe the future outlook, how things can look like and how can research support us in this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. Thank you for Dr. Mergard for insisting that I will have to come to Egypt a couple of times, and thanking for GOPA and the project to making this possible. It's really a pleasure to be here. The Research Institute is working on all sectors of education. So we start from early education, the kindergarten, till the late times of life. So we meaning further education, and trying to link the pathway of learning and the learning journey which people do throughout their lives together, and see what are the implications of better learning at the early stages or not that good learning at the elder stages. And we are doing quite a few projects in relation to TVET. One of the key issues is to support companies and economies by having the right people at the right time. And this is the challenge I think we are seeing in the cases. And I have another hat, and this is the hat of an entrepreneur, which looks a bit different to some extent than the head of or the director of a research institute on the field. And I will try to bridge the gap between different areas. So where we are now in almost at the end of the first quarter of the 21st century. We are talking about 21st century skills. The people who are now in the education system will be living till the year 2100. Which is an incredibly long period of time. So what will the future bring to them? The recent past has seen digitalization, automation, it was mentioned. We have seen the topics of climate change, sustainability. We are talking about internationalization and globalization. We are talking about demographic change. And the fact that we live far longer than we did in the past, and that the cycles of the economy are getting much faster. So the first waves were 16 years. Now we have almost 20 years of new technology, new advancements. And one of the most new is artificial intelligence, which is changing education, which is changing our lives, and which is changing the economy. If I look into the future, how will Egypt look like in 2030, for example? Will we see still donkey-driven lorries at the streets? Will we see solar-driven cars driving around? Will we see solar panels and photovoltaic in the desert? What is this country going towards? I see the opportunity of a quantum leap, which could be ahead, but the precondition is that you have the staff ready for the companies. And one of the key factors in this is the TVET sector. And if I say, where are you looking at renewable energy, photovoltaic in the desert? Do you have the technicians who are ready to install the plants, to equip the plants, and to run and operate the plants? Is this the case? If so, fine. If not, there is something to be done. We are talking about green hydrogen. And when I said this buzzword to Dr. Mergard, I said, well, are you sure? Are you aware that we were the first in the world who invented, in fact, green hydrogen almost 50 years ago? If I look at the present system, and we have seen very interesting and very great presentations what the status is at the moment, I wonder a bit whether the size and the speed is fast enough. Dr. Mergard presented how many schools they have opened over the last couple of years. The new generations are 1.5 to 2 million people. Is the sector big enough to cope, even knowing that some are not getting into the secondary education stream, or many will move to the academia? So this is where I have a bit of a concern. The next concern is we have a completely new generation of learners. They are used to digitalization. They are digital natives. My feeling is that TVET systems all around the world are quite often more analog than digital. We always think about textbook rather than serious games, digital equipment, digital learning. What does it mean for learning? Do we have to shift to so-called flipped classrooms, which means the student prepare at home and we discuss what has to be done in the classroom and what are the next steps? All people are different. Are we in a position to address the individual competencies that are already there by the kids and the youth? Or we are applying a one-size-fits-all or a one-mode-fits-all approach to? If you want to increase the sector, you need the so-called teachers. I don't like the term teachers because it's a bit too theoretical from my perspective. I would like to talk about instructors. That means people who know the reality on the ground in the company, who know the most recent state of the art in the company, and not what they have learned in the university theoretically 10, 20, 30 years ago. So this is a real step forward. You need, if you advance the system, if you scale up the system, you need far more teachers or instructors who run the system. Another challenge, the equipment. Many of the projects employ a one-off investment. So we have the funds during the project, you make the first investment, and then the time goes along. The technology changes, it advances, we will have disruption maybe. Do we have the system that allows to reinvest in due time to keep up with that, what is going on? And here I frankly say, and Dr. Megard, please apologize for being a little bit frank, I have a bit of a concern when it comes to the so-called business model. Education is like roads or train lines. It's a kind of infrastructure to the economic development of a country and of companies. And companies are not really willing to invest. So there is the question, how can we deal with the PPP approach, public-private partnership, to make it really work and to make it sustainable in the long run? In addition, I talked about teachers. The teachers need to have the most recent methodological and didactical competencies. They need to be competent and we don't need to talk about knowledge. We need to talk about competencies and skills and the capability of doing things. So we should think of do centers of competence and not of knowledge hub, which I see from time to time. And this is a mindset shift in the education sector that is needed in many countries. And the final thing I would like to mention is the question whether the authorities are in it and the system itself is really in a position to be fast enough to respond the very fast changes in the economy. They don't wait. They don't wait for Egypt to be ready for the future. They go to countries where the people are ready for the future. And this is a real challenge where I have a bit the feeling, not seeing all of this country, which is a very beautiful country, but I have the feeling that there is a way to go to advance with the processes, to be much faster and to provide the environment that the learning that takes place in the classroom or in the working in the laboratory to be on time and right on track. And now making the link to the TEREEE project, which is technical education and renewable energy and energy efficiency, we are discussing on what are the implications of that, what I just mentioned as a few headlines for the real world in the center of competence on renewable energy and energy efficiency. What does it mean for the construction of the school building, which cannot be a school building in the previous sense? It needs to be flexible. We need to have learning spaces where people can learn on their own. We need to have, of course, laboratories and workshops and all these kinds of, but how do they need to be designed for the future, that we have flexibility, that they are responsive to the economic needs where they are, whether they are in Aswan or somewhere in the north of Egypt, and what are the implications for bringing TVET of COCs closer to even rural communities and not just some of the big hubs. We are thinking about either we call it network schools or we call it satellites, so that we are closer to the people, because parents cannot go to Aswan necessarily if they live close to Luxor, for example. This is where we are at the moment. We are working on the 3+5 model, so 3 years of basic and 5 years of advanced technical education and training, and how this will really work out, including the business model, where I said, I think that this is a real challenge, and where I think we should look more into other forms, which may be even more innovative, like social impact funds or something the like. This in a nutshell, and the various points. Thank you.
Thank you very much.